It all started, as most suburban declarations of war do, with a piece of paper. Not a summons, not a subpoena, but a crisp, cream-colored envelope tucked neatly under the wiper blade of my tragically reliable 2004 Honda Civic. The envelope was embossed with the logo of the Harmony Creek Estates Homeowners Association, a serene-looking willow tree that, in my opinion, possessed a distinctly smug aura. I knew, with the kind of bone-deep certainty you get right before you walk into a surprise party you already know about, that this was not good news. Good news doesn't come in cream-colored envelopes. Good news comes in the form of a pizza delivery or a package you forgot you ordered. This envelope felt like it weighed 10 pounds, heavy with the judgment of 1,000 beige-loving souls. Inside, nestled on thick cardstock, was a photograph of my driveway. The photo was taken with the skill of a crime scene photographer, a harsh flash illuminating the victim. A single dark stain on the pale gray concrete. It was an oil stain, no bigger than my fist, a small dark tear shed by my faithful Civic. Below the photo was the verdict, typed in a soulless Times New Roman font. Violation notice. Code 11B. Surface purity and aesthetic uniformity. Infraction. Unapproved petrochemical discoloration on a residential driveway surface. Fine. $100. Payable within 15 business days to avoid further action. Remedy. Complete removal of the stain and restoration of the surface to its original, unblemished condition. $100. For a spot my car made. I stared at the letter, then at the spot. The spot stared back, oblivious to its role in this brewing conflict. $100. That's 4 large pizzas. That's a new video game and a case of beer. It was, in my mind, a ludicrous, punitive, and frankly insulting amount of money for such a tiny, insignificant blemish. It wasn't a violation. It was evidence that a car, a machine with moving parts and fluids, sometimes parked here. The notice was signed, of course, by Brenda Donaldson, president of the HOA, and self-appointed guardian of neighborhood mediocrity. Brenda lived 3 houses down, in a home so immaculately beige it looked like it had been dipped in a giant vat of latte. Her lawn was a perfect, unnerving green carpet. Her wind chimes played only C major chords. She was the kind of person who saw a dandelion and didn't think wish. She thought violation. I crumpled the notice in my hand. My mind, a place usually occupied by color palettes, client deadlines, and wondering if I should re-watch The Office for the 9th time, suddenly became a workshop for beautiful, magnificent, and utterly disproportionate revenge. She wanted an unblemished surface. She wanted aesthetic uniformity. Fine. I'd give her a new aesthetic. I'd give her something so uniform, so meticulously planned and executed, that she wouldn't be able to find a single flaw in it. She fined me for an oil stain, so I decided to paint a hyper-realistic, fully functional, starting grid and finish line included racetrack on my entire driveway. My first call, naturally, was to Sam. Sam is my best friend, an accountant by trade, which means his brain is a fortress of logic, reason, and sensible risk assessment. My brain, as a freelance 3D street artist, is more like a bouncy castle full of spray paint and bad ideas. We balance each other out. Usually he's the one talking me out of things, like the time I wanted to buy a decommissioned hot dog cart, or the other time I considered adopting a flock of pigeons. I texted him a picture of the violation notice, followed by a simple message. Code red. He was at my house in 20 minutes, holding a 6-pack of craft beer like a medic's kit. Okay, he said, setting the beers on my coffee table without any preamble. Talk me through the crazy. On a scale of 1 to buying the pigeon flock, where are we? We're off the scale, my friend, I said, pacing around my living room. We have ascended to a new plane of petty. Brenda has poked the bear. You're the bear? he asked, cracking open a beer. You're a 5'10" artist who considers a brisk walk to the mailbox a full day's exercise. A metaphorical bear, I clarified. A creative, artistically inclined bear with access to industrial-grade epoxy paints. She fined me $100, Sam. 100. For a spot that has been there for, what, a week? It's extortion disguised as neighborhood pride. Sam took a sip of his beer and examined the notice. Article 11B, Surface Purity and Aesthetic Uniformity. Sounds about right. It's an oil stain, Alex. You know the rules. But that's just it, I exclaimed, throwing my hands up. The rule is about uniformity. It says nothing about what that uniformity has to look like. It's a loophole, a glorious, beautiful loophole I can drive a metaphorical race car through. I grabbed my laptop and opened my portfolio. I create 3D chalk art for festivals and corporate events, illusions that, from the right angle, look like gaping chasms, fantasy creatures, or rushing waterfalls on a flat city street. It's a niche skill, but it pays the bills, and more importantly, it had prepared me for this exact moment my entire life. Behold, I said, spinning the laptop toward him. I pulled up a quick sketch I had already made. It was my driveway, but transformed. A perfect miniature racetrack, complete with a red and white checkered start-finish line right by the garage door. I'd included hairpin turns, a gentle chicane around the area where the recycling bin usually sits, and grandstands painted in forced perspective on the edges. And, right in the center, covering the offending oil stain, was a beautifully rendered logo for the Harmony Creek Grand Prix. Sam stared at the screen for a solid minute, his accountant's brain visibly buffering. The gears were turning, calculating the costs, the risks, the sheer, unadulterated stupidity of it all. You're going to paint a racetrack on your driveway, he said slowly, not as a question, but as a man confirming a terrifying diagnosis. A hyper-realistic racetrack, I corrected him, one that adheres to all principles of aesthetic uniformity. Every line will be perfect, the colors will be vibrant, the sponsor logos will be crisply rendered. Sponsor logos? He choked out. Of course, I said, beginning to type a list. I'm thinking Sam's Sensible Accounting, We Audit Your Fun, or perhaps Brenda's Beige World, all colors optional. We need authenticity. Sam leaned back on the couch, rubbing his temples. She's going to have an aneurysm, a literal, full-blown, rage-induced aneurysm. She'll fine you into oblivion. They'll put a lien on your house. But for what? I countered, my voice rising with righteous indignation. For having the cleanest, most meticulously painted driveway in the entire state. What rule does this break? It's not an oil stain, it's art. It's malicious compliance on a breathtaking scale. The sheer audacity will paralyze them. He was quiet for another moment, staring into his beer as if it held the answers to the universe. I could see the battle raging behind his eyes. The sensible citizen versus the friend who, deep down, loved watching me start fires. Finally, he let out a long, defeated sigh. Okay, he said. Okay, but I'm not helping you paint. I'm just here for moral support and to document your inevitable downfall for the sake of posterity. And the Sam's Sensible Accounting logo needs to be prominent. Deal, I said, shaking his hand. Welcome to the pit crew. The rest of the evening was a blur of planning. We measured the driveway using a tape measure and Google Earth. I calculated the exact angles needed to make the 3D illusions work from the street. We designed more fake sponsors. The gutter guys, we judge you from above. Petunia's passive-aggressive landscaping. We drank the entire six-pack. By midnight, what started as a spiteful doodle had become a multi-page, professional-grade artistic blueprint. It was happening. Operation. Grand Prix was a go. Brenda wanted a clean surface? I was going to give her a surface so clean, so artistic, it would become a monument to her own pettiness. The next morning, I woke up with a creative hangover and a sense of grim determination. Phase 1 was procurement. A project of this magnitude required specialized materials. A quick trip to a specialty industrial paint store provided me with everything I needed. Gallons of high-adhesion concrete primer, epoxy paints in racing red, brilliant white, asphalt gray, and grass green, plus an arsenal of rollers, brushes, and about a mile of painter's tape. The guy at the counter, a grizzled man with paint splatters on his glasses, looked at my haul. "Big job?" he grunted. "Just touching up the driveway," I said with a straight face. He raised an eyebrow but rang me up. The total cost was 3 times the amount of the fine. The irony was delicious. Before a single drop of paint could be applied, I had to deal with the original sin. The oil stain. I bought the most potent, chemically terrifying degreaser I could find. As I was on my hands and knees scrubbing the concrete with a wire brush, wearing goggles and gloves like a mad scientist, Brenda did a slow, deliberate walk-by with her perfectly coiffed golden retriever, Winston. "Good morning, Alex," she said, her voice dripping with saccharine victory. "So glad to see you're addressing the issue." "Morning, Brenda," I said, not looking up from my work. "Just want to make sure the surface is pristine. You know, for the sake of aesthetic uniformity. Wouldn't want any imperfections." "Excellent," she chirped, a triumphant smirk playing on her lips. She thought she'd won. She thought this was the end of it. Oh, you sweet summer child. This wasn't the end. This was the pressure wash before the Sistine Chapel. The scrubbing and priming took the entire day. My driveway, now a flawless, uniform sheet of light gray primer, was a blank canvas. It was probably the cleanest driveway in Harmony Creek Estates. I almost felt a pang of guilt. It looked nice, normal, sensible. The kind of driveway Sam would have. Then I remembered the $100 fine, and the feeling passed. That night, under the cover of darkness, not for secrecy, but because the primer needed to cure, I began the painstaking process of laying down the tape. Using my sketches, a chalk line, and a laser level, I mapped out every curve, every line, the starting grid, the pit lane, the chicane. It took hours. The entire neighborhood was asleep, shrouded in a silent blanket of conformity. Meanwhile, on my driveway, a revolution was being outlined in blue painter's tape. I felt like a guerrilla artist, a suburban Banksy fighting not against consumerism but against the tyranny of the tastefully mundane. The painting took 2 full days. It was glorious. I worked with the focus of a Renaissance master, music blasting from a portable speaker in my open garage. The first layer was the track itself, a dark, asphalt gray that contrasted beautifully with the lighter primer. Then came the details that would bring it to life. The vibrant red and white of the curbing on the turns, the brilliant green of the grass on the infield and runoff areas. I used shadowing and forced perspective to make the track look like it was banked, to give the painted grandstands depth. Sam came by on the second day, this time with a bag of burgers and a look of sheer awe on his face. "My God, Alex," he said, mouth agape. It's actually incredible. I thought it would look like a kid's drawing. This looks real." From the sidewalk, the 3D effect was stunning. It genuinely looked as if my driveway dipped down into a miniature racetrack before rising back up to meet the garage. The oil stain was now perfectly hidden beneath the beautifully rendered logo of a fake racing fuel company, Petty Chem. My neighbors started to notice. Mr. Henderson from across the street, a retiree who spent most of his days polishing a classic Corvette, wandered over, a slow smile spreading across his face. Is that Laguna Seca's corkscrew? He asked, pointing at a particularly tricky-looking series of turns I'd designed. Inspired by it, I confirmed. I call this one Brenda's Bend. He let out a hearty laugh. I love it. The wife's gonna hate it, but I absolutely love it. The first real sign of trouble, however, wasn't Brenda. It was a group of kids. A trio of them, no older than 10, came by on their bikes. They skidded to a halt, their eyes wide. One of them, a little boy with a helmet that was too big for his head, pointed a trembling finger. Whoa, he breathed. It's Mario Kart. Before I could say anything, they were on it. They dropped their bikes on the lawn and started running the course on foot, making engine noises with their mouths and jostling for position. My art, my carefully crafted act of defiance, had become a public playground. And you know what? It was kind of awesome. The moment was shattered by a piercing shriek. Get off of there! It was Brenda. She was power-walking toward us, her face the color of a ripe tomato. Winston the dog trotted beside her, looking deeply concerned. This is private property, she yelled, waving a menacing finger at the kids, who immediately scattered. She then turned her fiery gaze on me. Her eyes scanned the driveway, her brain struggling to process the sheer, unadulterated audacity of what I had done. What? She began, her voice a low, dangerous tremor. Is this? This, I said, gesturing with a grand sweep of my paint-stained hand, is a remedy. You said the surface needed to be unblemished and uniform. This is a uniform pattern applied over a now unblemished surface. I believe I have followed the letter of the law. The letter of the law? She sputtered. You've turned your driveway into a cartoon. This is a flagrant violation of so many things. Name one, I challenged, crossing my arms. Find me the rule in your sacred binder that specifies the exact shade of gray a driveway must be. Find me the clause that prohibits checkered patterns or artistic expression. She was speechless. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Her brain was furiously flipping through the Rolodex of HOA regulations she had memorized, searching for a weapon. Finding none, she defaulted to her ultimate power move. You will be hearing from our lawyer, she seethed, before turning on her heel and storming off, dragging a confused-looking Winston behind her. I watched her go, a giddy, triumphant feeling bubbling in my chest. I had done it. I had broken Brenda. I looked at my masterpiece, shimmering in the afternoon sun. It was more beautiful than I ever could have imagined. I had taken her petty bureaucratic nonsense and turned it into something joyful, something kids wanted to play on. Sam, who had been watching the entire exchange from the safety of my garage, whistled. Dude, he said, you are so unbelievably screwed. Nah, I said, grinning from ear to ear. This is just the first lap. The fallout was immediate and spectacular. Within 48 hours, my driveway had become the most controversial landmark in Harmony Creek. The official letter arrived, just as Brenda had promised. It was even thicker than the first one. This time it cited a different, more obscure bylaw. Article 14C, Maintaining Neighborhood Character. It claimed my driveway was incongruous with the established aesthetic and gave me 10 days to return the surface to a conventional, solid-toned state, or face a new fine of $500, plus daily penalties. I framed the letter and hung it in my garage. Meanwhile, the neighborhood split into clear factions. Team Brenda consisted of a few older residents who complained about the tackiness and fretted about their property values. They would slow their cars as they drove by, shaking their heads with profound disappointment. Team Alex, however, was much larger and far more enthusiastic. Mr. Henderson started parking his Corvette, angled in his driveway so it looked like it was waiting on the starting grid. The kids who had first discovered the track came back with their friends, using it for scooter races and elaborate games of tag. One afternoon, I came outside to find a dad, a guy from the next street over, timing his toddler's tricycle laps with his phone. He saw me and gave me a sheepish grin. He insisted, the dad said. He calls it the race house. The story went from local gossip to a genuine phenomenon when Mr. Henderson's teenage granddaughter posted a drone video of the driveway on TikTok. The video, set to a high-energy racing soundtrack, showed the incredible 3D illusion from the perfect aerial angle. It blew up. By the end of the day, it had 100,000 views. That's when the media showed up. A van from the local news channel parked across the street. A reporter, a young woman with impossibly white teeth and a microphone clutched like a weapon, ambushed me while I was getting my mail. "Sir, are you the owner of the now famous racetrack driveway?" she asked, a cameraman orbiting her. "I'm the artist and resident," I said, deciding to lean into it. "Welcome to the Harmony Creek Grand Prix. Qualifying laps are on Tuesdays." The interview was surreal. I explained the initial fine, deadpan. I talked about the importance of aesthetic uniformity with a straight face. I gave a shout-out to my fake sponsor, Petty Chem. The segment aired on the 6 o'clock news, right after a story about a lost cat and right before the weather. They even interviewed Brenda, who appeared on camera looking flustered and angry, clutching her HOA binder to her chest like a shield. "This is not about art," she said, her voice tight with rage. "It's about respecting the rules that keep our community beautiful and our property values high. This stunt makes a mockery of our neighborhood." The news segment just threw gasoline on the fire. The next day, a Saturday, was a full-blown circus. People from all over town were driving by, slowing down to take pictures. A couple of teenagers set up lawn chairs on the sidewalk to watch the action. My driveway had become a destination. The final straw for Brenda was the Hot Wheels. A little kid, maybe 5 years old, had brought a bucket of his toy cars and was having a massive race on the finish line. It was an adorable, innocent scene. To Brenda, it was the final indignity. She marched over, her face a mask of cold fury, and told the kid and his mom to leave immediately. The mom, taken aback, scooped up her crying child and left. That's when I knew this had moved beyond a simple feud. Brenda wasn't just enforcing rules anymore. She was actively stamping out joy. And I decided I had to double down. After the Hot Wheels incident, Brenda escalated things in the only way she knew how. She called the cops. I was in my kitchen making a sandwich when I saw the flashing blue and red lights sweep across my window. A police cruiser pulled up and parked directly in front of my driveway. 2 officers got out. One was older, with a weary, seen-it-all-before look on his face. The other was younger, and I could see him trying and failing to suppress a grin as he took in the sight of my driveway. I met them on the front porch. Brenda was already there, standing on the sidewalk, arms crossed, tapping her foot impatiently. "Can I help you, officers?" I asked calmly. The older one, whose name tag read Sergeant Miller, sighed deeply. "Sir, we received a call about a public nuisance and she called it an unauthorized traffic installation." He gestured vaguely at the racetrack. "It's a nuisance," Brenda shouted from the sidewalk. "He has people blocking the street. He's attracting children. It's a safety hazard." Sergeant Miller turned to her. "Ma'am, we've been sitting here for 5 minutes. The only person blocking the street is you." He then turned back to me. "Son, I'm just going to be straight with you. Did you paint this on your driveway?" "Yes, sir," I said. "Every last bit?" "Is it public property?" "No, sir, ends right at the sidewalk." He nodded slowly, looking it over. The younger officer, Rodriguez, took a few steps onto the driveway, tilting his head. "Wow," he said, mostly to himself. "The 3D effect is really good." Miller shot him a look, and Rodriguez immediately straightened up, resuming a professional posture. "Sir," Miller said to me, his voice low and conspiratorial, "my daughter saw this on the internet and thinks you're the coolest person on the planet. Off the record, this is hilarious." He cleared his throat. "On the record, the HOA is a civil matter. You haven't broken any laws. There's no public nuisance. You're not charging admission. As far as the city is concerned, you can paint your driveway any color you want, as long as it's not, a giant offensive symbol." "Is a racetrack offensive?" I asked. He glanced at Brenda, then back at me. "To some people, apparently, but not illegally so. Ma'am," he called out to Brenda, "he's on his own property. This isn't a police matter." Brenda was aghast. But the rules! The character of the neighborhood?" "Then you'll have to take it up with him or your HOA's civil court," Miller said, his patience clearly gone. "We're done here. Have a good day, sir." He gave me a curt nod, which I interpreted as a sign of solidarity. And he and Rodriguez got back in their car and drove away. The victory was so sweet, so absolute. The highest authority on the block had just publicly declared me the winner. Brenda stood frozen on the sidewalk, her mouth hanging open. She had fired her biggest cannon, and it had turned out to be a dud. Without another word, she spun around and marched back to her beige fortress, defeated. For now. I knew Brenda wouldn't give up. She'd find another angle, another bylaw. She'd wage a war of attrition. I decided that my best defense was a good offense. I needed to solidify my support, to turn my silly protest into a genuine community institution. The idea came to me that evening, inspired by the little boy with the Hot Wheels. The next morning, I went to a party supply store and a hardware store. That Saturday, I sent out an email to a few of the more supportive neighbors, including Mr. Henderson. The subject line was, "Inaugural Harmony Creek Grand Prix, this Saturday." The event was absurdly simple. I set up a table with juice boxes and cookies. I bought a bunch of cheap plastic trophies from the party store. I declared 2 race categories: tricycle and big wheel division, ages 2-6, and remote control car division, all ages. It was a massive success. At least 30 people showed up. Kids were beaming as they did slow, wobbly laps on their tricycles, their parents cheering them on from the infield, my lawn. Mr. Henderson, a man in his 70s, showed up with a surprisingly sophisticated remote control race car and dominated the RC division, battling it out with a 12-year-old from down the block. Sam came over to supervise, but ended up acting as the official race starter, waving a checkered flag I'd bought. The atmosphere was incredible. It was a block party, a festival, a celebration. People were laughing, meeting their neighbors for the first time. The very thing Brenda accused me of, disrupting the community, had brought the community together in a way her sterile, rule-obsessed regime never could. We gave out trophies to every kid who participated. They were beaming with pride. The whole thing cost me maybe $50. But the goodwill it generated was priceless. Brenda watched the entire event from her window, a ghostly silhouette behind her perfectly clean glass. She didn't come out. She didn't call the cops. She just watched, a silent, seething observer to the joyful world she was trying so hard to prevent. The Harmony Creek Grand Prix was no longer just my driveway. It belonged to the neighborhood now, and that made it infinitely more powerful. The Grand Prix was a turning point. The HOA sent another letter, this one from a law firm, filled with intimidating legal jargon about injunctions and property liens. But it felt hollow now. I had the people on my side. The climax didn't come in a courtroom or at a tense HOA meeting. It came late one night, about a week after the race. It was nearly midnight, and I was up watching a movie when I heard a strange scraping sound outside. I muted the TV and crept to the window. There, in the pale glow of the streetlights, was a figure. It was Brenda. She was dressed in dark clothes, wearing rubber gloves, and she was on her hands and knees on my driveway. In her hands was a bucket of turpentine and a heavy-duty scrub brush. She was trying to remove the racetrack herself. I couldn't believe it. I watched for a moment, stunned into silence. She was furiously scrubbing at the start-finish line, her movements jerky and desperate. The industrial epoxy paint, however, was barely budging. All she was accomplishing was smearing the colors slightly. This was it, the final, pathetic act of a defeated tyrant. I could have called the cops on her for trespassing and vandalism. I could have opened the door and screamed at her. I could have filmed it and made her a viral villain. But looking at her, a lonely figure trying to scrub away a piece of art in the dead of night, I didn't feel anger. I felt a little bit of pity. She had been so consumed by her need for control that it had driven her to this sad, desperate act. I opened my front door. The porch light flicked on, bathing the scene in a sudden, harsh light. Brenda froze like a deer in headlights, the turpentine-soaked brush held aloft. Her face was a mixture of terror and shame. "Brenda," I said, my voice calm and even. "It's epoxy paint. You're going to need a sandblaster to get that off." She didn't say anything. She just knelt there, caught. "You know," I continued, walking slowly down my front path, "you could have just talked to me before the fine. You could have just knocked on my door and said, 'Hey, Alex, your car leaked a bit, can you clean it up?' And I would have, and that would have been the end of it." She finally found her voice, but it was small, stripped of all its usual authority. "There are rules," she whispered. "They're just rules, Brenda," I said, stopping a few feet from her. "They're not more important than being neighbors. Look what this place has become in the last few weeks." I gestured around the quiet, sleeping street. "People are talking to each other. Kids are playing outside. Mr. Henderson is smiling for the first time in a decade. All because I broke one of your stupid rules. Maybe some of the rules are worth breaking." I looked down at the smeared paint at her knees. She had ruined my perfect finish line, and I realized I didn't care. The painting had served its purpose. "Go home, Brenda," I said softly. She looked at me, her eyes glistening under the streetlight. She dropped the brush, which clattered on the concrete. Then, without a word, she stood up, picked up her bucket, and walked back to her house, disappearing into the beige darkness. The next morning, I went out with my own bucket and solvent to clean up the turpentine smear Brenda had left. It was a strange feeling, repairing my protest art. As I worked, Mr. Henderson came over. "Morning," he said. "Saw the commotion last night. You all right?" "Never better," I said. "Just some routine track maintenance." He nodded, understanding. "You know, that woman has been running this neighborhood with an iron fist for 20 years. I've gotten 3 fines for my lawn being a 1/4 inch too high. I've never seen anyone stand up to her. What you did, it was good for this place." That afternoon, I found an envelope in my mailbox. It wasn't the cream-colored cardstock of the HOA. It was a plain, white envelope with Alex written on it in shaky cursive. Inside was a personal check for $100, signed by Brenda Donaldson. Tucked in with it was a small, typed note. The original fine was rescinded at last night's emergency board meeting, held in my living room. The violation notice for neighborhood character has also been withdrawn. B. Donaldson. No apology, no explanation. But it was more than I ever expected. It was an unconditional surrender. I never cashed the check. I pinned it to the bulletin board in my office, right next to the original violation notice. They were trophies of a war won not with anger, but with absurdity. The legal threat vanished. The HOA went silent. My driveway remained. But the energy around it had changed. The tension was gone, replaced by a quiet sense of permanence. It was no longer a protest. It was just a part of the neighborhood. A few weeks later, I was watering my lawn when Brenda walked by with Winston. She was heading in my direction. I braced myself, unsure what to expect. She stopped at the edge of my driveway. "The curbing," she said, pointing a hesitant finger at the red and white painted edges. "It's starting to chip a little bit near the turn." I looked. She was right. A small piece of paint had flaked off. "I have some leftover paint," she said, still not making eye contact. "The white, it's for my trim. It's an exterior semi-gloss. It should hold up well on the concrete if you want to touch it up." I was floored. Thanks, Brenda," I managed to say. "I appreciate that." She gave a curt nod. "Aesthetic uniformity is important," she said. And for the first time, I detected the faintest hint of a smile on her face. Then she continued on her walk. It wasn't a friendship. It was never going to be. But it was a truce, an understanding. She was, in her own weird, rule-obsessed way, trying to help me maintain the very thing she had tried so desperately to destroy. Maybe she had realized that if you can't beat them, you make sure their protest art is properly maintained. The story of the racetrack driveway became a local legend. My freelance business got a surprising number of new clients from the news coverage. The Harmony Creek Grand Prix became an annual event, a beloved neighborhood tradition with more kids and more elaborate remote control cars each year. My driveway is still a racetrack. It's a little more faded now, weathered by the sun and the seasons. The skid marks I painted are now joined by real ones from tricycle tires. The finish line is scuffed from countless sneakers crossing it. It's no longer a hyper-realistic illusion. It's better. It's a well-loved piece of my home. A permanent reminder that sometimes the most ridiculous, over-the-top, and petty ideas are the ones that can bring everyone together. And it all started with a single, insignificant drop of oil.